feel like the love for the Ruthless Aggression era has really ramped up in the past few years. Around a decade ago, the only thing anybody would talk about was the Attitude Era. It was about the feud between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, the creation of the Ministry of Darkness for The Undertaker, and how The Undertaker went from a phenom to a badass back to the leader of the dark side. It was about how WCW's invasion in 2001 was heavily underwhelming and how they could have booked it better. But I think what we need to talk about is not just the Ruthless Aggression era, but a specific brand and time period. You hear a lot of love for 2002, which was when the WWF transformed into World Wrestling Entertainment. But we're not going to talk about 02 and the development of the SmackDown 6 and the dawning of the OVW 4. Instead, we're going to look back on a specific year for the blue brand. For UPN SmackDown, we're going to look back at 2004. Because although it might not be a lot of people's favorite years, there was a lot of things that took place that really shaped the future of the WWE going forward. I feel like we should start off with the career of Brock Lesnar in 2004. Now, Lesnar wasn't around for much time during this year, and coming off of his hot rookie year in 2002 where he became the youngest WWE champion at the time, and going into 2003 where he had that banger of a 60-minute Iron Man match with Kurt Angle on SmackDown, along with that phenomenal WrestleMania 19 main event, you would never think that Brock Lesnar would walk away from the company that really built him as a professional wrestler in 2004. But that's exactly what happened. Heading into WrestleMania 20, Brock Lesnar had already lost his Undisputed Championship to Eddie Guerrero at No Way Out in February of that year. Eddie Guerrero would go into WrestleMania as the WWE Undisputed Champion, taking on Kurt Angle. However, Brock Lesnar would have a much bigger match, or at least that's what the fans had hoped for, going into WrestleMania at MSG. He would take on the recently debuting and already world champion in the WWE and WCW megastar Bill Goldberg. Now, you would think that Goldberg versus Lesnar would have been the dream match that fans had always wanted. A typical shoot fight, a hoss fight that wouldn't last very long, but it would leave the fans with a lot of memories. Now, we would get a really good rendition of this match years down the line, but that was far past the Ruthless Aggression era. What we got at WrestleMania 20 was two superstars who were ready to walk out on the WWE, and two superstars who had to try to come up with a decent match under a reigning amount of boos inside the arena, as the fans were wise to the fact that both men would be leaving the company following WrestleMania 20. We got a lackluster match in one of the worst WrestleMania matches in recent memory, according to many fans, and a match that Brock Lesnar would ultimately lose. So not only did he lose his WWE Championship to Eddie Guerrero, not only did he lose to a recently WWE debuting superstar in Bill Goldberg, but he would walk away from the WWE and not come back until 2012. The next superstar we're going to talk about is the Doctor of Thugonomics in John Cena. Cena, again, just like Lesnar, would debut in the WWE in 2002 as part of that classic OVW4. But 2004 was really the catapult and the ladder that he would climb in order to reach main event status going into 2005 and WrestleMania 21. But to start off the year, Cena had a lot of injuries and adversity to overcome. He got eliminated by Big Show at the Royal Rumble 2004 and was injured. He ripped apart his knee. He would come back at No Way Out and take on Kurt Angle and Big Show in a triple threat match to determine the number one contender for the WWE Championship going into WrestleMania 20. Kurt Angle would make John Cena tap out, which is what would lead to him challenging Guerrero at WrestleMania. But Big Show and John Cena would have unfinished business, and it would be Big Show who John Cena would defeat to become the new United States Champion. And not only become the new champion, but win his first singles championship inside the WWE at Madison Square Garden. Cena's run with the United States title wasn't extremely memorable, but it's one of my most fond memories of John Cena early on in my professional wrestling watching career, I guess you could say, without calling it a career, because that's really when I started getting into the WWE, was around 2004, 2005. John Cena would defend the title against Rene Dupree, and it was more the title mixed with wanting to win over Tori Wilson, Rene Dupree's dog Fifi and Tori Wilson's dog. It was like a whole entire thing that they went on about in this feud, and the feud didn't last long, but John Cena would eventually defeat Rene Dupree at Judgment Day, which was the pay-per-view following WrestleMania for the SmackDown brand. He would then defend it in a fatal four-way at the Great American Bash against Rene Dupree, Booker T, and Rob Van Dam, and he would retain the title successfully, but then would eventually be stripped of the title by the new SmackDown general manager in Kurt Angle, which would lead into a best-of-5 series with the man who he defeated at the Great American Bash in Booker T. It would be Booker T versus Cena with a best-of-5 series culminating at October's No Mercy pay-per-view after kicking off at SummerSlam from this year. They would tie each other 2-2, with John Cena getting the pay-per-view victories, with Booker T getting his victories on episodes of SmackDown, and I believe at some live events as well. But it would be John Cena who would ultimately come out on top as the new United States Champion, moving into a feud with a newly debuting superstar who was pretty cool. A hidden gem of John Cena's career or run in 2004 on SmackDown came against the Deadman, the returning Deadman who returned at WrestleMania 20 in The Undertaker. This didn't really have anything to do with his United States Championship run. It wasn't really in storyline. It was just a very solid match that I feel like a lot of people forget about when they look back at both John Cena and The Undertaker's career, as I believe this marked the first time that the Deadman character took on the Doctor of Thugonomics. Not the American Badass, but the Deadman. The Undertaker would come out on top with a clean victory over John Cena, but I feel like this is something we definitely needed to touch on for the year 2004. Now we talk about the man who was cool. Carlito Caribbean Cool would be the next challenger for John Cena's United States Championship, and shockingly, the Razor Ramon style gimmick, or the new take on the Razor Ramon style gimmick, would end up defeating John Cena by hook or crook by using his trademarked padlock and hitting him in the skull and getting the 1-2-3 to become the new United States Champion, not only in his first night in the company, but his first match inside the WWE. This would carry John Cena through the remainder of 2004 through Survivor Series and Armageddon, because it would move into a much darker turn as John Cena would be kayfabed, stabbed in the kidney inside of a Boston nightclub, and we would find out that it was done by none other than Carlito's bodyguard at the time, known as Jesus. Jesus was a big, tall, imposing individual, and he would take on John Cena in December 2004's Armageddon pay-per-view. John Cena would defend the United States Championship in a street fight against Jesus after reclaiming the title on an episode of SmackDown from Carlito. Carlito and Cena would have a run-in at Survivor Series prior to Armageddon as well, but then Cena would set his sights on the 2005 Royal Rumble, moving into WrestleMania 21. We'll now shift our focus to JBL, or John Bradshaw Layfield, one of the biggest and most successful heels of the entire Ruthless Aggression era, alongside the SmackDown brand and the year 2004. JBL was shifted into the main event scene after originally becoming a member of the Acolytes in the Ministry of Darkness around 1999 in the Attitude Era, and a member of the Acolytes Protection Agency alongside Farouk, who was originally a member of the Nation of Domination. The WWE needed a new mega heel to challenge the champion in Guerrero at the time after the likes of Brock Lesnar exited the company, and JBL, with no pun intended, fit the bill. The billionaire bastard became one of the most hated superstars of the Ruthless Aggression era. He would later develop a little entourage or a group that he called the Cabinet, alongside Doug and Danny Basham of the Basham Brothers and Orlando Jordan. JBL would capture gold and defeat Eddie Guerrero in a Texas bull rope match at the Great American Bash 2004. He would carry the WWE Championship all the way up until WrestleMania 21, where he would eventually be defeated by John Cena, who we just talked about prior to this little section of the video. JBL would always get by the literal skin of his teeth with every championship defense. There was rarely a clean victory in any of his matches, but he would always find a way to retain the championship by hook or by crook. He defeated the likes of The Undertaker via disqualification at SummerSlam 2004 before he was sent through the roof of his limousine at the entrance ramp by The Undertaker. This would then carry us into a last ride match, or a Ride from Hell match, I don't remember exactly what the name was, at October's No Mercy pay-per-view, where JBL would again retain the championship with interference and help from another heel during the Ruthless Aggression era, and especially around the late tail end of 2004 into 2005, known as Heidenreich. For as much as you hated JBL, you can't deny his success as a singles competitor and his success as a heel. It was unfortunate times for the WWE, which created a fortunate way for JBL to become one of the biggest stars at the time in the entire company. But you cannot talk about 2004 SmackDown without talking about John Bradshaw Layfield. We'll now switch to the return of the Dead Man, one of the most iconic superstars in the history of professional wrestling aside from the WWE, in The Undertaker. Now, 2004 was a very interesting year for the man known as the Demon of Death Valley, the man from the dark side. Because from 2000, when he returned as the American Badass Undertaker, up until his return in 2004, he hadn't used the Dead Man gimmick or the Phenom gimmick since he was in the Ministry of Darkness. The Undertaker would return going into WrestleMania 20 in a feud against his brother and longtime rival in Kane. Now at this point, Kane had already been unmasked going into 2003, and he was on his demonic, demented, tortured soul style of run as the Big Red Machine, without the mask of course. But the entire lead up to WrestleMania and the return of The Undertaker was Undertaker tormenting Kane and not allowing him to live with what he did to The Undertaker at Survivor Series 2003, where he helped Vincent Kennedy McMahon win a Buried Alive match against The Undertaker, which was the last time we saw him on WWE television. The Undertaker would return at WrestleMania 20 donning his Phenom gimmick again. He would come out with the Druids and the purple lights and the hymns throughout the arena of Madison Square Garden and go on to defeat Kane, thus continuing his WrestleMania undefeated streak, which at the time I believe was at 13-0 or 14-0. The Undertaker's career following the win at WrestleMania 20 over Kane was very weird in 2004. The Undertaker would go on to feud with the Dudley Boys and Paul Heyman going into the Great American Bash, with the stipulation that if he did not lay down and lose and allow the Dudleys to pin him, winning the handicap match, then Paul Bearer would be submerged in a tub of concrete. Not only did Undertaker not lay down, he was able to go on to defeat the Dudleys, but then he would turn heel all in the same, because he would be the one to pull the lever and submerge his longtime idol in Paul Bearer, basically killing him off TV. This would start the heel turn of the American Badass and Dead Man hybrid that we saw from The Undertaker in 2004 and 2005. The Undertaker would then align himself with Paul Heyman as Heyman would take control of the urn from Paul Bearer. And whilst Paul Heyman was in control of The Undertaker would challenge the likes of Booker T and even the WWE champion at the time in John Bradshaw Layfield at SummerSlam 2004. Now, we already talked about the fact that The Undertaker lost that match due to disqualification and then sent JBL through the top of his limousine. But The Undertaker's 2004 was just weird. There was even a point where Viscera and Gangrel, former members of the Brood in the Ministry, showed up on an episode of SmackDown during this year and faced The Undertaker in a 2-on-1 handicap match. Aside from the match with John Cena, I just feel like the feud with the Dudleys, Paul Heyman being in charge of The Undertaker, it just wasn't needed, and it's honestly something I completely forgot. Because for the most part, the only things I really remembered from The Undertaker during this year was his return and face-off with his brother Kane at WrestleMania. For the most part, The Undertaker's career wouldn't really pick up until 2005 when he would go on to challenge the up-and-coming legend killer in Randy Orton at WrestleMania as he would try to break the streak. He would have a feud with Heidenreich, who debuted later on in this year and was even managed by Paul Heyman. Yeah, and it was just a very less than memorable year for The Undertaker in 2004, like I said, aside from his return at WrestleMania. The championship matches with JBL, the Fatal 4-Way at Armageddon to cap off the year where JBL was still the undisputed champion. Going into 2005, he would feud with Heidenreich, which started at the end of 2004 after Survivor Series. He would challenge him to a casket match. He would then challenge Randy Orton at WrestleMania 21, or I guess you could say Orton would challenge him. But yeah, The Undertaker's career was entertaining, it was odd, and I think it was just one of the most off years for The Undertaker's career aside from the return at Mania. We'll now move on to talk about Eddie Guerrero. In 2004, alongside being on the SmackDown brand, was one of his most successful, if not his best year, in his entire WWE run. He was moved over to the SmackDown brand when Paul Heyman, after the original and initial WWE draft, created the SmackDown 6, which consisted of 3 teams at the time: Edge and Rey Mysterio, Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit, and Los Guerreros, Eddie and Chavo Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero was originally on the Raw brand, but was traded for Chris Jericho to be moved over to SmackDown. And when Eddie Guerrero moved over to SmackDown in 2002, It took a little bit longer for him to reach main event status than I think a lot of people would have expected. But following the Royal Rumble at No Way Out 2004, as we've already touched on, Eddie Guerrero would finally reach the summit. He would become the undisputed WWE Champion by defeating Brock Lesnar, as Lesnar was on his way out of the company going into the match with Goldberg at WrestleMania 20. Heading into the later parts of 2004, Angle's feud with Guerrero would continue, or should I say Guerrero's feud with Angle would continue, as it would be a traditional Survivor Series match with Team Angle consisting of Carlito, Mark Jindrak, and Luther Reigns alongside Angle himself, taking on Team Guerrero, which consisted of Eddie Guerrero, John Cena, Rob Van Dam, and The Big Show. It was originally set to be Rey Mysterio in the match, however, John Cena would take his place. And this would really cap off Eddie Guerrero's 2004 after he had lost the championship. You know, the last pay-per-view of the year, we already talked about how he was in the Fatal 4-Way for the Undisputed Championship alongside JBL, Booker T, and The Undertaker. And JBL would continue to retain his championship by any means necessary. And then heading into 2005, Guerrero would kick it off at the Royal Rumble. He would feud with Rey Mysterio going in to WrestleMania and heading into SummerSlam with the custody of his son Dominic. And that's a whole nother topic for another video. But the 2004, or the year of 2004 for Guerrero on SmackDown was, you know, very entertaining and very impactful. He had the tag team with Big Show as well, where Kurt Angle pulled out the tranquilizer and shot Big Show in the back of the neck. I mean, you had the jobbers of SmackDown with Luther Reigns, Mark Jindrak, who was originally set to be a member of Evolution. I think he was going to take the place of Batista. Before they put Batista in the group, it was going to be Orton, Jindrak, Flair, and Triple H. But yeah, SmackDown in 04 was very entertaining. It's one of the years I remember the most fondly because that's when I was able to really get into wrestling and start to remember what I was watching, even though my first WrestleMania I watched was WrestleMania 17. But at the end of the day, SmackDown in 2004 was the epitome of the Ruthless Aggression era. It was the epitome of the Ruthless Aggression era, and that's really what I remember the most. And then when you really get into it in 05, 06, 07, Undertaker in 07 was untouchable, but SmackDown in 04 was special, and it really was the true centerpiece of the Ruthless Aggression era, in my opinion.